I don't want to waste your time, so there won't be an intro. Theater Master is by far the weakest bombsite on coastline. It hasn't always been that way, but it certainly is right now. What we're going to do today is to take a look at a team that did defend this site in the Invitational and see if we can find a way to make it viable, even if only as a one-off. But first, we have to understand why exactly this site is considered to be weak. Theater Master has two problems that in combination make it really difficult to play the site. First one is that because of the master window, you have to give up an entire half of the site pretty much immediately. But that in and of itself is not big of a deal. There are plenty of sites that you can defend without actually having a player in them. CC on bank or vents on border come to mind. The problem is that you can only do that if you can reliably deny plants in the other half of the objective, which on Theater Master is definitely not the case. Here, the attackers even have two plant spots on opposite sides of the objective, close to the window and close to the bed. And if that wasn't enough, it's actually kind of difficult to anchor in Theater. You need to open this wall in order to even have a chance of denying a plant, but it also eliminates half of the spots you can play. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Going on a small tangent here, I think that for ranked specifically, the best default way of holding Theater would be to just spam the sites with shields, like here, here and here, and then stack ADS and Dwame magnets all over Master. But while it might be able to hold off ranked attackers, it's really not something that will stop a Pro League team for a long time. In order to do that, you need to come up with something a bit more creative. So let's look at what Giants came up with in their invitational game against MIBR. The setup starts out looking pretty default. They are making default rotations and they are reinforcing default walls. The weirdest thing right now is probably the fact that they are reinforcing walls in VIP to hallway. But let's jump to the interesting part. They are opening a rotation in VIP to hallway. And if we take a look at VIP, we can see a shield, an ADS, and an alibi prisma set up in the northwest corner. So that already tells us that they are definitely trying to contest VIP, but more on that later. The actual heart of the setup is not VIP though. Instead, it's the way they play around 90 and the connecting hallways. Generally speaking, there are two areas that are always going to be super strong to hold on to on pretty much every map. It's staircases, and it's the 90-degree corners where two long hallways meet. Think about border, for example. If there was a way to hold this corner, that would be pretty huge, right? Well, guess why everyone is playing CC holds? It's because it allows you to hold that corner. But on most maps, it's actually kind of difficult to hold a spot like that. Because, well, it's a corner where two hallways meet. There's usually not a lot of cover involved. However, that's not the case for Coast. The corner where Dog is standing right now is actually perfectly safe to play in. And the fact that it's Dog playing here even has two extra advantages. You can revive yourself if you get downed by a nade, and you have an ACOG which helps a lot in fights against opponents on the other end of the hallway. And to further improve that hold, Giants are using a Goyo shield in the southern part of the hallway, which allows them to play an extra defender inside the actual hallway, and then they also have a Goyo shield on the western part of the hallway, which allows Dog to crouch up safely to the hole in VIP so he can help out Alibi. Alright, let's talk about the VIP hold then. They have walls towards the hallway reinforced, so Alibi can play in the books corner without being exposed to the roof. And combined with the fact that Dog is holding her back from 90, Alibi only needs to worry about VIP balcony. And for that, she has a shield set up in that corner, with an ADS protecting it, and a prisma right on the window. But having Alibi hunker down in that corner would be a pretty big mistake. Because whenever you're playing positions that would usually be considered attacker territory, based on how many angles there are to hold it from outside, you basically have no choice but to be aggressive. Because if you don't, you're going to get naded out very early into the round. And don't get me wrong, you are going to die in that spot eventually, you just have to make it worth it in terms of time and utility. And somewhat counterintuitively, the best way to do that is by aggressively peeking. You have to make the attackers be afraid of you. They should be too scared to even pull out a nade because of the risk of you peeking. You have to make them think, I'm going to get him on the next peek, but then that final peek never comes. Obviously that's quite a tightrope walk, but there definitely are players that can pull off something like that. Sadly, MIBR never really tries to invest utility into clearing Alibi, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about in this clip, where Ysera just punishes a bit of carelessness by holding an aggressive angle. Alright, so now we basically have the full setup. Let's put it in blueprints to get a better overview. They have reinforcements on site and around VIP, shields, prismas and ADS to be able to play in the VIP corner, and more shields and ADS in both parts of the hallway, combined with the bulletproof cam at the end of it. In terms of operators, they are playing Alibi in VIP, Dog in 90, Legion in the southern part of the hallway, Goyo in theater, and Jaeger roaming below. Okay, so let's take a look at how this worked for them against MIBR. Instead of straight up taking on the Alibi in VIP, MIBR's plan is to take control of the other side of the top floor first, and then, once they cleared out 90, they can pinch Alibi from both sides. But in order to do that, they first of all have to deal with the Dog in 90, which means dealing with the Goyo shields and both of the ADS. And now, the same thing we talked about for how Alibi is supposed to play also applies to Dog as well. Him peeking the hallway and pre-firing it aggressively is a really good play, because it makes it so that the attackers are way more afraid to peek. And that's especially important here, because in order to get rid of the shield, they need to peek the hallway with a nade in hand. And with Dog aggressively peeking, they're going to think twice about the correct moment to do it. In the end, this actually gets Dog a free kill, because Sledge was still busy pulling up his gun again. Obviously, that also wasn't very well played by MIBR in terms of dealing with the ADS, but the point still stands. And now, we see Alibi doing the same thing and getting a kill on VIP balcony by peeking the window. Moving to the other side of the map, we have Ash tanking 2 Legion traps, and shortly after, we can see just why the new shields are considered so strong, and why Goyo shouldn't have 3 of them. After that, the round is basically won. Now, of course you can say something like, well, they just got lucky winning gunfights. The underlying strategy is actually bad. And in a way, I'd agree with you. This setup might be pretty good against teams that are clearing the luggage Aqua Hookah side, but it's actually not that good against takes that focus on VIP and Master, which becomes apparent the next time Giants are trying to play this site. Because now, MIBR is doing just that. They send Zofia into kitchen to open up the floor below Alibi, injuring her in the process, and then they get another kill on Dog trying to rotate into VIP. After having VIP control, they rotate Gridlock to Master Window, who smokes out Theater, which allows IQ to run all the way to the default plan spot, which wins them the round. And this just shows why Theater is a bad site. Once MIBR really understood the setup that Giants were using, it was incredibly easy for them to counter it. So, does that mean that the strategy is actually bad? I would say no. Obviously, if you look at the strat in blueprint format and you know exactly where everyone is playing and where the utility has been used, it's very easy to find flaws. For example, that an Alibi playing in that corner can easily be killed from below, or that the setup is still weak to smoke plants and Master. And it's also easy to spot these flaws if you've played against that strat once already. But it's not easy to do that if you have never seen the strat before and the only information you get is by droning during the actual round. So the solution here is to play this strat once and once only. This forces attackers to come up with a counter during the actual round with only limited information available. And sure, teams that are strategically strong, like SSG or Dark Zero, would rip this strat apart even in the very first round. But that's not the vibe I get from teams like MIBR, for example. And in my opinion, there are a lot more MIBRs out there than there are SSGs. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that playing a flawed strat can actually be the correct play, as long as you do it only once and against the correct opponents. Honestly, I just want to see more interesting and new strats, like this one definitely is. And I'm sure there are a ton of really cool ideas hidden in the back of a team's strat book that are never going to see the light of day because someone thinks that some part of the strat is flawed. In reality, I think that a lot of teams wouldn't be able to spot those flaws on the first try. Especially if you consider how Pro League teams are droning during their prep phase, which they don't. All of them are just driving their drone back to spawn or setting it up at some point away from the objective. No one actually drones the objective itself, so the earliest a team can spot the flaw is when the round is already long underway. And I think especially teams that are on the lower end of the table would profit a lot from showing up with a bunch of weird strats. If you're playing against Rogue online, for example, realistically speaking, you're just going to get slapped if you play default stuff. So why not try to throw them off their game by playing some weird one-off strats? There's not really much you have to lose here. Although, against Rogue specifically, you probably won't be able to stop aces anyways. Alright, that was my case for wanting to see more interesting one-off strats in Rainbow. And even though this video was mainly about Pro League, the same is obviously true for ranked and T3 competition too. I mean, if Pro League teams can't figure out a site on the first try, your random ranked opponents won't be able to do it either. So don't let those novel strats wither away somewhere in the back of your mind. Okay, that's it for the video. I hope you learned something new, and thanks for watching.